Welcome. NATO has been essential for European security for over more than 70 years. We are confronted, as we all have seen the last few days, and even I would say hours and minutes, with a serious crisis situation on the eastern flank of NATO. We're very glad that our Prime Minister and Secretary General of NATO, Mr. Stoltenberg, still found in these moments time to join us. The Secretary General, as you all will understand, will join us from Brussels. And let me begin by welcoming all of you on behalf of the Netherlands Foreign Ministry and also on the German counterpart as co-organizers, and as well as co-sponsors Canada, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Finland and Sweden. And let me also say a warm welcome to those, and I've looked at the cameras. This, I would say, this is home and this is office, I can say. There are a lot of participants with us from their home office and most probably also around the world with a different timeline. Thank you so much. It's great to see also students from different universities. If I say Leiden, are you here? Yeah. Nijmegen, Radboud, Amsterdam. The Dutch Academy, the cadets, are you there? Yeah, there's a huge group coming from Breda also coming. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us, experts from think tanks and ambassadors, the NATO representatives. Thank you so much for being here today, because the information today is very important for you to share on the seminar tomorrow, as we all know. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to introduce our Prime Minister, please. Please.
Hi.
Prime Minister Rutte, very welcome.
Good to be here.
And
welcome all of you.
And the Secretary General of NATO, Stoltenberg, will join us. He's probably still in meetings, so he will show up, to say so. And of course, then we will go through the further introductions. My name is Angeline Nijsink, and I will be going through with you through the program and moderating this afternoon. Prime Minister, how are you?
Well, I'm fine.
As always, I would say, but
the world is not.
No.
I mean, there's a lot happening. So I think it is very timely, and it's perfect timing that we have this gathering here today and tomorrow. And maybe I could also thank Jan Tien, but also Annemijn and her whole team, and all the others on the team for organizing this event. Yes. So if you would join me in a warm round of applause for all those who organized this, please.
Great.
Including Veerle and all the others I forget.
I know.
And of course, Angeline for sharing her talent here today as a moderator.
And we know how many techniques is going around here and around, you know, the background as well.
Absolutely.
To make this happening. But let me say thank you to both of you for underlining as well, being here today. That's so important for students as well to hear about NATO, a stronger NATO and stronger partnerships.
Exactly.
If they don't hear from you as a Prime Minister, that NATO is so important.
And when I was preparing again for this gathering, I realized how big that family is.
It's a
that
huge
we have so
family.
many organizations, the UN, the OSCE, of course, the European Union, but also so many countries from the Western Balkans, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, of course, Ukraine, Georgia, all sharing in this bigger family, working so closely with NATO. And some of them also participating in some of the NATO missions, like Ukraine did in Afghanistan. So it's really very special. And we cannot keep the world safe if we will not have this type of cooperation.
No, and if you talk about a family, we all know that a family can only be united if you talk with one another, if you see each other, if you meet each other. And this is actually one of the first seminars, I think, for most of you, at least for me it is, to come together again after 2 years of a lockdown. That's so joyful, I would say. Isn't it?
Finally.
I see some of you just saying, finally coming together, and then with the Prime Minister and with State Secretary Stoltenberg, talking about family. Mr. Stoltenberg, welcome.
Are you Jens? Yes.
Can we hear you? Welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Stoltenberg, thank you so much for being here this afternoon. Let me emphasize on behalf of the audience, on behalf of all of us, how much we appreciate it that you're taking time on this particular moment to stay and to be with us. So thank you so much. And we all know that you have to be in a meeting again, I think at 5 o'clock even, or somehow. The next visit is coming up. So can I ask you, Prime Minister, to talk about the family of NATO, a stronger NATO and partnerships. The word is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you so much for coming to this event and a warm welcome to what is actually my hometown, The Hague. Welcome to the World Forum and this seminar on NATO's partnerships. And of course, I also would like to especially welcome Secretary General Stoltenberg for joining us via video link. Jens, it's simply good to see you. One of your distant predecessors, Dirk Sticker, was NATO's third Secretary General. As Dutch Foreign Minister, he was one of the actual architects of the alliance. And in his memoirs, he explained why NATO was established. As long as international law is subject to the whims of individual states, as long as there is no higher system of justice or international ethics that all states honor, we cannot build international policy on the quicksand of idealistic hope. We must accept the hard truth. We must do everything possible to ensure that we are a strong enough alliance, economically and militarily, to be able to defend our freedom. Sticker wrote those words more than 55 years ago, but I believe they are as relevant today as ever. In an unprecedented move, Russia is threatening war on Europe's eastern border. Its recognition of the independence of Luhansk and Donetsk and its deployment of so-called peacekeeping missions constitute a serious escalation and a flagrant violation of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Back in 2014, we all witnessed the occupation of Crimea. And now Russia has shown it is prepared to take further aggressive steps. That is unacceptable, and it cannot go unchallenged. It's a threat to Ukraine, certainly, but it's also a threat to our European and international security. Russia is trying to deny sovereign nations the right to choose their own path. It's trying to turn back the clock with absurd demands about withdrawing troops and equipment from countries that became part of NATO after the fall of the Berlin Wall. We must be very clear. There are no old or new, Eastern or Western, first class or second class member countries. We are all just NATO allies, and we stand together as one. Recent events prove that NATO is essential to defending our security and our freedom. This bolsters my conviction that transatlantic military cooperation is still the cornerstone of our collective defense and the foundation of our collective security policy. and that we should therefore keep working to ensure a strong and united NATO, not least in a new global reality. With that in mind, it is simply vital that we talk about the next strategic concept, about how to adapt our alliance to meet today's threats and tomorrow's as well. Threats that may be hybrid in nature or may not even be easily recognizable. This calls for a fresh approach, new instruments and smarter strategies, a robust plan for the next 10 years. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we are looking at one crucial element of that plan, our partnerships. Because if we have learned one thing in the past few years, it is that these can determine our success or our failure. We saw this, for example, as a raging pandemic exposed how vulnerable and also interdependent we all are. We see it in the growing security risks posed by climate change. And right now, in Russia's aggression in Ukraine. Our partnerships, old and new, have proved crucial. With the OSCE and the United Nations, with Ukraine and Georgia, with the Western Balkan countries and our Indo-Pacific partners, Australia, Japan, New Zealand and Korea. Territory. And that will also make NATO as a whole stronger. We certainly therefore have a lot to do. And not only in the area of defense cooperation within the EU, but also in the cooperation between the EU and NATO. And that's why the Netherlands is pressing for an ambitious new NATO-EU joint declaration, setting out how we will make this into a reality. Ladies and gentlemen, the current situation makes one thing very clear. We need a solid, united alliance, and we are all responsible for ensuring that. Our starting point should, of course, be strong member countries that do their share and have their armed forces in order. The Netherlands takes that duty seriously. Earlier this month, together with Germany and Norway, we marked the 5-year anniversary of our joint contribution of military personnel to the enhanced foreign presence in Lithuania. And we have just committed to providing F-35 fighter jets that will perform quick reaction alert duties from Bulgaria in response to the Russian threat. In addition, the new Dutch government has agreed a major increase to our defense budget, 10.7 billion euros during this term in office, and a structural increase of 3 billion euros each year. This will bring us a lot closer to the target of 2% of GDP. And not only us, defense spending across the alliance has increased considerably. So, all in all, we can say that NATO is in good shape. And that's largely thanks to your excellent work as Secretary General, dear Jens. Under your leadership, NATO has begun an ambitious modernization process to make us stronger, both politically and militarily. Our allied family has grown to include new members and partners. And that means we can take firm, united action in times of crisis and danger, as is the case today. Jens, we owe you a big debt of gratitude. I look forward to working with you closely in your final 6 months as Secretary General of our alliance. And now, it is my pleasure to give you the virtual floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister Rutte. Dear Mark, thank you so much for your kind words and also for your strong leadership and personal commitment to our alliance. And it's great to be here with you all online. Let me also thank the Netherlands and Germany for co-hosting this important seminar today. And I'm delighted that former NATO Secretary General Jaap de Hoop Scheffer is joining this discussion today. Let me also thank Canada, Italy, Portugal, and Spain, and our partners Finland and Sweden for co-sponsoring this event. This is the third in a series of 4 seminars to help prepare our next strategic concept. And this seminar focuses, as you mentioned, on partnerships. Today, we are facing the most dangerous moment in European security for a generation. Our highly valued partner, Ukraine, remains under imminent threat from Russia. NATO allies are united in their full support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. We will continue to provide Ukraine with strong political, practical, and financial support to help Ukraine build their defense capabilities, modernize their defense and security institutions, and uphold their right to self-defense, which is enshrined in the UN Charter. Many NATO allies also provide important bilateral support to Ukraine. And I welcome the recent decision by the Dutch government to provide military equipment to Ukraine to defend itself. There is much at stake in today's crisis. The risk of conflict is real. Russia is using force and ultimatums, not only to redraw borders in Europe, but to try to rewrite the entire global security architecture. Moscow is challenging fundamental principles for our security, like NATO's right to protect and defend all allies, and the right for every nation to choose their own path. This is not only about Ukraine and Georgia, it's also about denying other European countries, like Finland and Sweden, their freedom to choose. Finland and Sweden are 2 highly valued partners bordering the Baltic Sea, with whom we cooperate closely in joint exercises, operations, and political dialogue. The crisis in Ukraine underlines the importance of cooperating with our partners to defend our shared values and security, not least with the European Union. We are working closely together on the current crisis. I speak regularly with my EU counterparts, and NATO allies, including Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, are coordinating with the European Union on economic sanctions, as we saw very clearly yesterday. NATO and the European Union are 2 sides of the same coin. We have different roles, remits, and membership, but what we do is complementary. So while the EU is strengthening all the tools in its toolbox in respect to the current crisis, NATO has enhanced our deterrence and defense across the alliance, with more troops, ships, and planes. We have significantly increased our military presence in the east of the alliance, and we are ready to do even more. I welcome, as you said, Mark, that the Netherlands has increased the readiness of its forces for the NATO response force. It is sending more troops to our multinational battle group in Lithuania and more fighter jets to Bulgaria. This shows that the Netherlands is a highly valued and very committed NATO ally. Beyond the current crisis, NATO and the EU are cooperating in many other areas, from cybersecurity to stability in the Western Balkans and maritime issues in the Aegean. We have lifted NATO-EU cooperation to unprecedented levels in recent years, and our ambition is to go even further in new areas like resilience, emerging technologies, and the security impact of climate change. The Netherlands has been a key driver of closer NATO-EU cooperation, including on military mobility. And I thank you, Prime Minister Rutte, for that. NATO's partnerships are fundamental to our ability to preserve peace, promote stability, and increase security for all. They are a two-way street. They help us all adapt to a more contested and competitive world. Over the last 3 decades, NATO has built a broad network of partnerships with countries and organizations near and far, from Finland and Sweden to Colombia and Mauritania, and from the Mediterranean to the Asia-Pacific region. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, NATO's partnerships helped to spread freedom, democracy, and security throughout Europe. Since the 1990s, NATO's operational partners have helped increase stability beyond our borders. And NATO's partnerships remain essential as we continue to adapt to a more dangerous and competitive world today. We also work with many other partners, for example, with Iraq, and our partners in the Middle East and North Africa, to stabilize our neighborhood and fight international terrorism. Through our NATO 2030 agenda and the next strategic concept, we are significantly stepping up our training and capacity building support to partners in areas like counterterrorism, crisis management, peacekeeping, and defense reforms. We also want to deepen our existing partnerships and develop new ones, to work with like-minded countries to address the security implications of a more competitive world. Ladies and gentlemen, we are faced with a new normal, a world of rising strategic competition and increasing challenges to our security, where authoritarian powers are seeking to rewrite the global rulebook and demonstrate that might is right. So we face a fundamental question about the world we want to live in. One where big powers dictate what others do through aggression and ultimatums, or a world where everyone is free to choose their own path, able to live in freedom and democracy. This is the world we want, and the one we are working for. We are stronger and safer when we stand together. Thank you so much.
Secretary General, thank you so much for your strong and clear message. And I would like to say to Mark Rutte, our Prime Minister, your message is clear, is strong, and you gave us a lot of food for thought in this afternoon's discussion with the audience. Once again, thank you very much to both of you, but to you as well from Brussels. The fact that you're taking time today underlines once again the importance of you as the Secretary General of NATO for the audience. So once again, all the best. Wish them for these days.
Thanks, Jens. I'll speak to you tomorrow.
Thanks again. Well, there's enough food for thought, I would say,
So-
to have questions and answers with you from the audience. Prime Minister, you will have time for that, so we're very happy to have you with us for another 10, I think 15 minutes. And it's good to know once again that there will be similar tomorrow with NATO representatives. I'm looking at the first row here. There's the Dutch representative of NATO, Mrs. Marisa Gerards as well, and some others, policy makers from different ministries. It's very important, I would say, to you as students, and I will encourage you to participate, but also in terms of concrete, out-of-the-box proposals, because that's what's going to work. And you know as students what I mean by that. Saying that and knowing that a few of you will have questions, there's always not a time limit because there's so much time today, but I will give you 30 seconds. And I assure you, I assure you, you can do that, and I assure you it's long enough for good questions. Needed, mind you. As I already mentioned, there's a group of officer cadets up here. Where are you? Ah, look at, there's a huge group. Can I just ask you for a first question? Whom of you is going to ask a question? Hello, could you please say your name?
Good afternoon, my name is Hanneke Oenema.
Hello, Hanneke. Good afternoon. Let me just say, if I'm well informed, as part of the bachelor degree in war studies, you as officer cadets from the Dutch Academy are taking a course on Dutch security and defense, that's true?
Yeah, that's true.
Right. And your course is also, of course, on strategic concept and paper writing on that?
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. I'm saying that because, you know, 30 seconds is otherwise gone. So, your question.
I have a question regarding the Russian-Chinese relationship. As we all know, President Putin and Xi Jinping recently met, and they reaffirmed their support for one another's foreign policy. What could this mean for the international power dynamics, and how should NATO respond to that?
Yes, a very good question, and great that the whole group is here. Very proud of you. I think it underlines the importance of working together, not only within the group of 30 NATO countries, but the fact that we have this cooperation with so many other countries, including, you mentioned China, you mentioned Russia, and Russia is all from Europe up to far into Asia. So this cooperation with countries like Japan, with Korea, but also, of course, New Zealand, Australia, is the more important for this reason. And then I think that cooperation should be as practical as possible, logistically, but also, for example, in intelligence sharing, in understanding what is happening in all those parts of the world. And at the same time, with China, for example, we have an open relationship. We trade with China, we have dialogues with China. Of course, we have also differences of opinion, for example, on human rights, on Uyghurs, other issues. So I believe we should keep open that relationship with China as much as possible, but at the same time, use that cooperation we have as NATO inside the 30, but also outside the group of 30 with all these countries where we have this cooperation with, and make it very practical. And I think this issue, the visit of Putin to Xi Jinping, underlines the more that importance. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me go to another question somewhere up there. Mr. Dean from the Klingendahl Institute. Yes, sing your hand, please.
Yes, Prime Minister, over the last months, NATO and also the Netherlands have very firmly reaffirmed NATO's open door policy and the fact that the Russian Federation has no veto over eventual membership of Ukraine and Georgia. But now, by recognizing the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, Russia has a permanent military presence in Crimea and in these republics. To what extent does that influence NATO's decisions and Ukraine's perspective for eventual NATO membership? Thank you.
It should not. And let me tell this to those who are saying that there is now a change or a difference. And we know that Putin basically wants to somehow Finlandize Ukraine, like Finland was in the times of the Soviet Union, Western, the Warsaw Pact NATO times before the Berlin Wall came down. There's one country who decides whether it wants to join NATO or not, and that's Ukraine or Georgia or whatever country. And there are 30 countries, the present member states of NATO, who will decide on membership. And Mr. Putin is not part of the 30, so he has nothing to do with that decision. We have to be very clear.
Thank you very much, Mobdeen. Thank you for being here. We've seen you broadcast for these days. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us on Eastern flank in Europe, and you're specialized in that on the Klingendahl Institute. Thank you. Another question. I just raised your hand, so raising your hand, please. Introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. My name is Attila Mesterházy, and I'm the Vice President of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. Thank you very much for this possibility. This crisis shows us that we face as a democracy, an alliance of democracies, a great and serious challenge from autocracies and those who are advocates of illiberalism. Putin is targeting Ukraine because of its people choose the democratic path and the Euro-Atlantic integration. So yesterday we just adopted in the NATO Parliamentary Assembly in Brussels our contribution to the strategic concept, and we put in the heart of it the democratic values, the shared democratic values. So I would like to ask you, how can we promote and protect, with the help of our partners, this idea that the whole alliance is based on these shared democratic values, which is challenged very much nowadays? Thank you very much.
Now, first of all, you are doing it by being, I believe, the Vice President of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. And that, for me, underlines and puts in headlines again the fact that NATO is an organization not only targeted on defending what we collectively want to defend, be it our territory or be it in other parts of the world. But NATO is also an organization based on values. It is a corporation based on values. And also in the Dutch new government program and in our traditions, multilateralism, international law. We are in The Hague. The Hague is one of the capitals of the United Nations. This is the international city for the international law, for justice. If we would just be a defense organization, we are the most powerful common defense organization in world history. We have moved beyond the Roman Empire by now. So strong NATO is these days. But if it would only be defense and not values, we would not get there. And the fact that we have a NATO assembly, I'm not sure that the Warsaw Pact, when that existed, had a parliamentary assembly. And if it had one, it had no influence. And that's the difference. And that is why we need NATO, but we need also you guys from our national parliaments who participate in that collective assembly. And thank you for that.
Thank you very much, and I fully agree that NATO Parliamentary Assembly, those members from parliaments coming together from 30 countries is very important. And so thank you coming to the Netherlands today as well, coming to The Hague for that. There are also questions from also, of course, our participants at home. And because there are a lot of people, as I already mentioned in the start of the event, looking from home. As we all know, participants at home, they don't see them, but they do have questions. Can I ask one of the questions to you, Prime Minister?
Yeah.
It's about the how will cyber power drive and guide the actions of states in global politics in the context of rapidly digitizing the world?
Cyber.
Cyber.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's also one of the reasons why we need this new orientation in the next 10 years. And the work Erne Verhagen and the whole group working on the strategy have focused on is, of course, on the importance of doing more collectively also with our partners outside the NATO 30, but also focusing on hybrid threats, on cyber. And clearly this is not new. I mean, we know it's there now for 10, 20 years. But I think we do realize that we need to do more there. And in that sense, I'm happy that this new strategic orientation of NATO is very much focusing also on these new, not new, but emerging and constantly changing threats. And when we look today, there was just this report coming out of Ukraine that government websites and most of the regional websites in Ukraine hosted by the government were not accessible. Well, of course, this is probably a technological failure. Has nothing to do, I guess, with the speech Putin gave on Monday. But let's assume there is a connection. Then it shows you only how vulnerable we would be if we would not do more in this terrain. And I know that, for example, David van Weel, the Deputy Secretary General, is working on emerging disruptive technologies. And how can we also have the technological answers to this? And how can we make use of the best people, be it around Eindhoven, be it around Grenoble, be it around the West Coast in the US, or wherever in NATO territory, to make sure that we have an answer also to these emerging technologies, also from the business perspective.
And particularly young students as well, of course.
Without them, we would be simply
knowledgeable. Knowledgeable as all of you are, particularly on the new issues. There's room for 2 more short questions. Yes, please, up there.
Mr. President.
Your name and affiliation, please.
I'm Slava Krieger, from Second Secretary from the Russian Embassy. And I wanted to ask you, recently we hear more of personal accusations and attacks against our President, Vladimir Putin personally. Why using such a simplification instead of trying to analyze clear Russian national interests? Thank you.
Yes, well, that is a fair question, and I value your presence here today, and the fact that you raise that question. I have had many dealings with Vladimir Putin. When I came into office, I visited him, he visited me, and we built a good personal relationship. That changed, of course, with Crimea in March 2014. And it changed completely after the downing of flight MH17 in July 2014. And still after that, we had many conversations, most of them in German, when we met in international conferences, and we had a chance to talk particularly about the follow-up of MH17. And I think here's somebody who understands clear language. And we have seen that in his speech of last Monday. So I don't think he will get frightened by some strong language. I think he understands that, and it is the best way to deal with the Russian president. So I will continue to do that. But thank you for the question.
Last question for the Young Atlantic, somewhere. The Young Atlantic, where are they? Yes? Please, raise your hand.
Thank you, Prime Minister. My name is Koen Meijering, the chairperson of YAS Netherlands.
Jason?
No, Young Atlantici.
Young Atlantici.
Ah, Young Atlantici, great.
You spoke a lot about European, EU and NATO cooperation in your short speech. I was interested to hear how would you think the EU can step up their game in defending our continent? Thank you.
Of course, we need to do more, as I said, on PESCO and other projects. We work together on military mobility and so many other issues where I think the EU could pull more together to leverage more from the collective capabilities we have as a European Union. And that is on the defense side. And as Jens Stoltenberg was saying, complementary to what we do collectively in NATO. The EU is, of course, first of all, a common market with a common currency and, like NATO, common values. And what we need to do more and better, I think, on the European side and within the European Union, is to leverage that part of our assets. To have a higher level of collective wealth creation, competitiveness, etc. And I believe there is so much more we can do, because if we are economically and military more successful as a European Union, of course, primarily focusing on the economic and trade side, then the impact the European Union will have on the world stage will be bigger, because we are more relevant. And that means that we should, of course, stick with the powers of principle, but we should work more on the principles from the principles of power. And that means also using our worldwide leverage in terms not only of our economic strengths and trade, but also our collective development aid spending, how we can make sure when we close trade deals with other parts of the world that we uphold our standards. I believe we are doing that better, but still I believe we can do more. So yes, it is working collectively. All the European Union countries were also part of NATO, but also the others, to work on our collective defense, complementary to NATO, but also to be first class as the biggest world trading bloc, being much more effective in leveraging that strength than we are doing currently. And I think we can do more. And I will probably early March deliver a speech where I will talk about that aspect and how that will connect to our power base. So thank you for that question.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Rutte. I think it was a short time, but a lot of questions, and there's a lot of influence from you taking to the strategic concept in March. And I'm a strong believer, Prime Minister, that this will be the last time you can discuss with students the strategic concept.
Absolutely.
Because I'm sure that some of the organizations around here, from the youth organization and student organization, will invite you to deal and to discuss with you the concept again.
I would love
you emphasized very much on stronger NATO and partnerships. You were very much clear in that. So thank you for that. And we wish you all the best and wisdom as well.
And thank you again
thank you for
she is one of the senior members of Parliament.
Thank you for
you hosting this event.
Thank you for being
Applause
here.
for you.
Thank you for being here, Prime Minister. Thanks.
Hey.
Dank je.
Fantastisch. Dank je wel.
Dank je wel. Now we're going to have a small intermezzo because we're going to change the stage here for the panel. So I will just go down and ask some of you what your impressions are, and so the cameras will follow. You know, this is always kind of sneaky how this is going to work out, because there's a camera, and participants at home, they might like the color purple, but they might not like my bag and everything, so I'll just try. Okay, I'm so happy to see the delegation of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, because it might that not all of you know how much important it is with 30 countries to have parliamentarians gather together and come together and share, you know, their views. As a former member of Parliament and NATO Parliamentary Assembly, I know how important it was for me to meet my colleagues from Estonia, from Finland, from Spain, and all over the world, because through their eyes you see the world. You know, living in the Netherlands, going from north to south in 3 hours and from west to east in 3 hours, we think we know the world, but it's going to be very different. Can I ask you, Ruud Kolen, you're a member of the... Could you please stand up that they can see you? And they like your bag. Yeah, no, they can see you. I think they can see you. Ruud Kolen, you're one of our senators. You're a member of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. You're also a professor at University of Leiden. What is your reflection on what's going on? And well, you get 2 times 30 seconds.
Well, I think it's a great time to have this meeting here in these very difficult days today. A meeting about NATO, and what I heard in the speeches of the Secretary General and the Prime Minister, but also the question of the young Atlanticists, is the importance of collaboration between European Union and NATO. And there are sort of 2 sides of the same coin, as the Secretary General said. Still, there's a lot of things to do, I would say. We talk about the strategic concept and partnerships between NATO and other countries, but at the same time, European Union is also preparing its own strategic compass in the next few months. And we think that they are can be put together easily, but there are some differences between them. And my wish would be, also for the discussion about a strategic concept, is that how to include also the ideas of the European Union with its own strategic compass, with strategic autonomy for Europe, and how that relates exactly to the NATO. For example, if you look at the Western Balkans, it's so important these days that the security is there and that NATO collaborates with them. But there you have some differences. Some countries are partners of NATO, some countries are not members of the European Union. And there's a lot of work to be done also to secure security and defense in the Western Balkans, which is also important for us.
Thanks so much, Ruud Kohler. Can I give the word to Hendrik Blidal, who is also here? He's the Deputy Secretary General of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. So he's the one actually who can reflect, if I may ask you, to 30 countries.
Yeah, thank you, Angeline. First of all, glad to be here. Thank you. I didn't know you were here, so good to see you again. The other thing that is really good to see, because the Assembly has put a lot of effort into this, is reaching out to students, to younger generation, to explain what NATO is, what we do, what it is, what it is not, what we stand for, because we are an alliance that stands for something. We stand for values, and it was good to hear all the good comments about shared democratic values, because that's what brings us together. We are an alliance that is not just an alliance that doesn't like Russia. We are an alliance because we are founded on values, and that's what brings us together. So that was great, and we are advocating for a center for democratic resilience to bring even more democracy and shared values into NATO. So we're looking forward to that when we send our comments to the Secretary General and the countries.
Thanks very much, Thanks very much. Ladies and gentlemen, now we will go to the second part of this event, and I would like the panelists to come in. Please join us. Hello.
Hey, good to see you.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome, please. Well, Mr. Jaap de Hoop Scheffer, you just mentioned that the power of politics in European DNA, the Prime Minister said. You will come back to that, I'm sure. Well, we already mentioned that there's serious threat going on in the world. We just discussed that, and we heard that through the speeches of the Secretary General and the Prime Minister. And let me say, we are all delighted to present to you a panel of 4 strong, independent experts from universities and think tanks. They will share with us this afternoon their thoughts of NATO's past, present and future, and of course with the emphasis on partnerships. And I'm curious also if you could refer to the speeches you already heard. You're coming from Canada, Ottawa, this morning even. Thank you so much to be with us. From Washington and from Albania. And last but not least, the hometown of Mr. De Hoop Scheffer, The Hague.
A 5-minute bike ride. 5 minutes,
5 minutes only. You're biking daily, isn't it? So that makes that you can still do that. Thank you. Jaap de Hoop Scheffer, we're delighted to have one of the most knowledgeable persons on NATO in our midst. And we keep saying that because we're all, if I may say, very proud of you as a former Secretary General of NATO, as a former Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and currently you're professor at the University of Leiden, among, I would say, a lot of other activities. And we are happy if you on the broadcast and sharing your valuable knowledge with us. So please, can I ask you your 6 minutes?
Yes.
All of you will have 6 minutes. You have 30 seconds, they have 6 minutes. I'll try to fill the time. Please, and after the panel discussion, of course, with you, with the audience. But come back to that if all of you had their share. Jaap de Hoop Scheffer.
Thank you so much, Angeline. NATO. NATO, of course, has an interesting history. It started, of course, during the Cold War, was very successful, focusing on its core responsibilities, its core task, and I say again, it was successful. Then came, I think, principally after 9/11, a more expeditionary phase of NATO. That was during my mandate as Secretary General of 2004-2009. Afghanistan is a good example. And now, Vladimir Vladimirovich is of course, leading to a very strong NATO focus on its core task and core responsibility again. I'm not going to talk at length about Ukraine. We can come back to it during the Q&A, and both the Prime Minister and Secretary Stoltenberg spoke about it. So I'll not dwell too long on it. I must share, nevertheless, a grave concern with you, apart from the political concerns already voiced earlier this afternoon. And my concern is that the relatively rational Vladimir Putin I have met in my NATO days, and I have followed like you afterwards, that relatively rational Vladimir Putin is losing from the raucous, obsessive Vladimir Putin we saw a few days ago. And that is dangerous, because in any conflict, and some of you might remember 1962, Cuba, the missile crisis, finally rationality survived. And my grave concern is that this might not be the case this time. The second observation I would like to share with you is that for the younger generation, for the students here, the word war has come crashing into your generation, as it is again in my generation. I was a young second secretary in the Dutch NATO delegation during the end of the Cold War. We don't have the Cold War back, but we have a situation where war seems to be imminent. And that is a big danger, a big I should say, difference for the younger generation as you have grown up. So this Vladimir Putin, this obsessive and obsessed Vladimir Putin, wants a Yalta 2.0, a Europe with spheres of influence. And that is, as both the Prime Minister and Secretary Stoltenberg have indicated, that is, of course, not acceptable. Two partnerships. First of all, NATO should adopt and is adapting to a two-superpower world. We have all grown up with a one superpower world, the United States of America. We now have clearly two superpowers. And the question, and that's about partnerships, of course, is how global should NATO be? How global should NATO want to be? Yes, and we'll hear more in detail at a later stage. It is, of course, important for NATO, and it was mentioned, to have serious political discussions with countries like Japan, Australia, the Republic of Korea, New Zealand, and let me also add India. It wasn't mentioned yet, but India, as China's big regional rival, is a nation, the biggest democracy in the world, we should pay more attention to. Of course, that political dialogue. But when I ask myself and you the question, how global should NATO be? It is also about the question, should NATO as an alliance patrol and guarantee freedom of navigation in the South and East China Seas? Should NATO do that as an alliance? Or should individual NATO allies do that? As we saw a few months ago, when the Queen Elizabeth, the British aircraft carrier, was doing a freedom of navigation operation in that part of the world, accompanied by Dutch and other NATO frigates. A very essential question for NATO. I think if I would ask this question in the United States of America, the jury would still be out. The Americans can tell us, and President Biden could say in the run-up to the strategic concept, you focus on your core task and your own area, the Euro-Atlantic area plus, I would call it, and let us handle the Indo-Pacific. The US could also come to NATO with a message, no, we would like you to have there as an alliance, as a NATO alliance. As I said, the jury is still out. The southern dimension of NATO, the second important partnership region. Classical threats like terrorism, migration, but also hybrid threats like climate change, Africa's demography. NATO there, and then you have, of course, the Mediterranean Dialogue and the Istanbul Cooperation Initiative. NATO is here confronted with what I think is crucial for your conference tomorrow, and that is, where are NATO's priorities?
Yes.
You cannot have political discussions with each and every single partner. And that is relevant in the southern dimension, where you have the Sahelian zone on the one hand, and you have the Gulf monarchies on the other hand, and all the others, of course. Second basic question with partnerships, are you engaging into these partnerships on a thematic or on a regional geographic basis? When you do it thematic, some partners might have the feeling that they're left out.
Yes.
If you do it on a geographical basis, yeah, you have the need to have them all in. Second fundamental question. Going to the east, it is of course clear that the NATO-Ukraine Commission and the NATO-Georgia Commission should have all the attention NATO has to give to those two commissions. But I would also specifically mention the Western Balkans. Unstable. Bosnia-Herzegovina is not stable. Ask Mr. Dodik in the Republika Srpska. NATO is still in Kosovo with KFOR. Serbia is sitting on the fence. The European Union, a critical remark, is dragging its feet on the admission of North Macedonia and Albania. And there NATO and the EU, and then I'm coming to a few final remarks,
please,
absolutely have common interests, not only in that area. And that is why, and Secretary Stoltenberg said it very clearly, when you discuss partnerships, the partnership between NATO and the European Union is, in my opinion, the most important one. Europe should stand on its own feet militarily, complementing NATO. Article 5 is NATO, but there are many crisis areas and scenarios I can think of that we could not always ring the doorbell of the Oval Office in the White House and tell the Americans, please, could you help us out?
Thanks.
So it is very important and very relevant that that partnership should play a crucial and central role in the new strategic concept. And let me stop here.
Thank you very much. Very impressive and fruitful thought again. Yes, you might give an applause, definitely. Thank you so much. Lauren Speranza, as I'm well informed, you're just coming from the Munich Security Conference?
That's right.
So there's so much to discuss and to share with us. You are the director of the Transatlantic Defense Security Center for European Policy Analysts, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
In Washington, D.C.?
Yeah. You're from Washington, D.C. You also contributed to the expert report 1+4 with the recommendations already to the strategic concept, isn't it? So you're very well informed and prepared for it as well. And your extensive portfolio on publications on deterrence, hybrid threats, NATO and defense technology. The floor is yours. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here with so many distinguished panelists and guests. I think we already have a great foundation about partnerships going in our discussion, but I thought maybe I could just zoom out for a little bit to talk about, you know, why do we do these partnerships? And I thought I could offer some ideas and recommendations from the report, which you mentioned. I'm part of this task force back in Washington with Val and some others, led by Dan Hamilton. And the report that we just released talks a little bit about how to think about partnerships in this era. And the first thing is kind of organizationally thinking about what types of partnerships we do. And there is a first group of partners that you could think about as countries that might like to become members of the alliance one day. So Ukraine and Georgia, of course, come to mind. And for them, you know, partnerships are a tool to help them prepare for eventual membership. And here, I think it's really terrific to highlight that it's so wonderful that nations are lining up to join the alliance. And, you know, nobody is lining up to join Russia in that way. And this really just underscores the importance of the alliance and its enduring relevance. You know, nobody at the Munich Security Conference was talking about NATO being brain dead anymore. You know, the relevance is really palpable. So these partnerships are a way for countries to continue modernizing and working towards this goal of a Euro